Genoa City was about to be thrown into chaos once again, and this time the storm was coming from every direction. Secrets were piling up, old betrayals were reopening wounds, and the people who thought they had everything under control were about to realize that nothing in their world was truly stable. The next 2 weeks would test loyalties, destroy trust, and push several lives to the edge in ways no one could have predicted. Lily Winters found herself standing in the center of a fire she had helped ignite. Her decision to work with Victor Newman on the fake abduction scheme had finally come crashing down around her, and the fallout was brutal. Devon Winters and Nate Hastings were furious when they learned the full truth. To them, this was not just a strategic move or a morally grey decision made under pressure. It was a betrayal. Lily had crossed a line, and both men made it painfully clear that they were not ready to forgive her. Devon was especially shaken. For him, trust was everything, and Lily's actions made him question how far she was willing to go when power and control were involved. Nate, though calmer on the surface, was just as disappointed. He had believed Lily was better than this, but now he saw someone who had chosen manipulation over honesty. Lily tried to defend herself, insisting that her choices had a purpose and that she had reasons for doing what she did. But neither Devon nor Nate seemed interested in hearing excuses. For the first time in a long while, Lily felt truly isolated. While Lily's world was beginning to crack, Victor Newman and Kane Ashby were preparing for another dangerous round in their bitter war. Their conflict had moved far beyond business rivalry and into something much more personal. Every conversation between them carried the threat of destruction, and every move felt like the beginning of a larger battle. Victor had made it clear that Kane would not escape unscathed, and now it seemed he was ready to follow through on that promise. Victor was not a man who made threats lightly. When he said he intended to make Kane suffer, he meant it. Kane, however, was not willing to back down either. He knew he was facing one of the most ruthless men in Genoa City, but he also knew that showing fear would only make Victor stronger. Their confrontations became colder, sharper, and more dangerous with every encounter. The tension between them spread into everything around them, pulling others into a conflict that was far from over. At the same time, Phyllis Summers was once again stepping into battle mode. Her anger toward Lily was already simmering, but it would soon boil over into open war. Their clash would revolve around betrayal, Kane, and all the unresolved bitterness that had been building between them for far too long. Lily believed Phyllis thrived on chaos and destruction. Phyllis, on the other hand, saw Lily as a hypocrite who pretended to be above everyone else while making just as many selfish and damaging choices. When the two women finally came face to face, their confrontation was explosive. Every word was sharp, every accusation landed like a slap, and neither one was willing to back down. Old resentment mixed with fresh anger as they attacked each other over everything that had gone wrong. There was no civility left between them, only rage and wounded pride. By the end of it, it was clear that whatever fragile peace had once existed between them was gone for good. Victoria Newman then stepped into Phyllis's orbit with something that had the potential to change everything, or at least that was the hope. She brought Phyllis a furious letter from Summer Newman, written in Milan and delivered with the weight of a daughter's heartbreak. The letter was raw, emotional, and full of pain. Summer's words reflected deep disappointment, anger, and fear over the choices her mother kept making. It was not just criticism. It was a desperate plea from a daughter who felt she was losing her mother to obsession and destruction all over again. Victoria seemed to believe that if anything could get through to Phyllis, it would be Summer's pain. But Phyllis was too deeply locked into her own war to surrender now. The letter hurt her, perhaps more than she would ever admit, but it was not enough to make her step away from the Newman empire or change course. In Phyllis's mind, this was no longer simply about power. It was about proving she could not be pushed out, ignored, or defeated. Her determination only hardened, even if it came at the cost of the people she loved most. Elsewhere, Abby Winters and Devon Winters were forced into another deeply painful reality when troubling news emerged about Dominic Winters. They had hoped that time would slowly heal the emotional damage caused by the kidnapping ordeal, but it became increasingly clear that the trauma had not simply faded away. Dominic's therapist raised concerns that suggested he might still be struggling with lingering emotional effects from what happened, and the news hit Abby and Devon hard. For Abby, the thought that her son was silently carrying fear and pain was devastating. She began to question everything, wondering if she had missed signs, ignored changes, or failed to protect him in the way he needed most. Devon felt the same crushing guilt. Even though he wanted to stay strong and focused, the possibility that Dominic was still suffering tore him apart inside. Their concern quickly turned into desperation as they tried to understand how deeply the trauma had affected their son. And with Dominic's emotional wounds coming back into focus, another painful truth resurfaced: Mariah Copeland's role in everything that had happened. Although Mariah had avoided prison time, Abby and Devon were struggling with what that meant emotionally. The fact that Dominic was still paying the price while Mariah was moving through a different kind of consequence created a bitterness neither of them could fully ignore. Even if they tried to stay compassionate, the resentment lingered just beneath the surface. Mariah herself was far from okay. She was about to begin a psychiatric facility stay, and while that was meant to help her, it also forced her into a terrifying confrontation with her own mind. She could no longer run from what she had done or the darkness that had led her there. Every step forward felt painful, uncertain, and humiliating. She knew that healing would not come quickly, and worse, she knew that the damage she had done to her marriage might not be repairable at all. Tessa Porter was trying to hold herself together through all of it, but she was emotionally exhausted. She loved Mariah, but love alone was no longer enough to erase the fear, confusion, and heartbreak that had settled between them. Just when Tessa was trying to focus on holding her marriage together, an unexpected opportunity arrived. Danny Romalotti approached both Tessa and Daniel Romalotti Jr. with a proposal that could change their future. The offer seemed tied to music, creativity, and possibly a new professional direction, something that might have once felt exciting and full of promise. But now, the timing could not have been more complicated. Tessa was torn. Part of her wanted to say yes and grab onto something hopeful in the middle of so much pain. Another part of her felt that stepping into a new opportunity while Mariah was spiraling would be the ultimate betrayal. Daniel too had to consider what this offer might mean and whether he was emotionally in the right place to move forward. Far from Genoa City, another life was quietly unraveling in a much darker and more dangerous way. In Las Vegas, Nick Newman was spiraling fast. What may have started as reckless self-destruction was now becoming something much more serious. Nick got his hands on more fentanyl, and along with it came another substance thrown in for free. A seemingly small detail that carried potentially devastating consequences. The deeper he sank into this world, the more impossible it became for him to pull himself out. Nick was not thinking clearly anymore. His judgment was slipping. His emotions were unstable, and the isolation around him was growing. He was vulnerable in every possible way, and that made him the perfect target for someone like Matt Clark. Matt was watching, waiting, and moving carefully. He had no intention of letting Nick escape easily. Instead, he was preparing to track him down, close in, and trap him when Nick was at his weakest. Matt's plans were not just dangerous, they were deeply calculated. He understood exactly how to use someone's pain against them, and Nick's fragile condition made him easy prey. The closer Matt got, the more ominous the situation became. Nick was walking straight into something he might not be able to survive, and the people who cared about him had no idea how close to disaster he really was. Adam Newman, meanwhile, was also stepping into dangerous territory. His connection to Spider's world was pulling him deeper into a place filled with criminal risk, unstable alliances, and threats he could not fully control. Adam had always believed he could handle the darker corners of life better than most people, but even he was beginning to drift too far into something unpredictable. Every move he made put him in greater danger, and the line between strategy and self-destruction was becoming dangerously thin. Back in Genoa City, Nikki Newman sensed that something was off and turned her attention toward Jack Abbott. She knew he was hiding something, and it would not take long before the truth about Patty Williams began to surface. Once Nikki started piecing things together, she would not let the matter go. If Jack had been keeping something that important buried, there had to be a reason, and Nikki was determined to uncover it. As the truth emerged, Nikki's anger toward Victor only deepened. She might even begin thinking about ways to teach him a lesson of her own. Nikki was no stranger to Victor's manipulations, and if she believed he had gone too far yet again, she would not hesitate to strike back in whatever way she could. Her alliance with Jack could become far more significant than either of them expected, especially if they decided that Victor needed to be knocked down a few pegs. Elsewhere, a very different kind of emotional complication was brewing. Sienna Bacall would walk in on a moment that immediately stirred discomfort, jealousy, and suspicion. She would spot Noah Newman and Audra Charles sharing a private, emotionally charged trip down memory lane. What might have seemed innocent on the surface would feel anything but harmless once Sienna saw the energy between them. There was history there. Real history, and it would be impossible to ignore. The look in Noah's eyes, the tone of Audra's voice, the way the past seemed to come alive between them would be enough to send warning bells ringing in Sienna's head. Whether Noah meant anything by it or not, the moment would leave Sienna deeply unsettled. She would begin to wonder whether Audra was becoming more than just a memory from Noah's past, and whether her own place in Noah's life was less secure than she wanted to believe. At the Park Cafe, Sharon Newman would be carrying her own quiet burden. She would be visibly upset, emotionally distracted, and clearly weighed down by something she could not easily shake. That vulnerability would not go unnoticed. Phyllis, of all people, would find Sharon in that fragile state and surprisingly offer to help. The moment would feel unexpected and layered with tension, because Sharon and Phyllis had never exactly been known for calm, supportive friendship. Yet, in that scene, something softer and more complicated might begin to emerge. Sharon's growing concern about Nick was likely becoming impossible to ignore, and Phyllis, despite all her flaws, might recognize the seriousness of what Sharon was feeling before anyone else did. Whether that interaction would lead to genuine support or simply more emotional mess remained to be seen. But it was clear that Sharon's fear about Nick was only beginning. As the week of April 6th through April 10 unfolded, the darkness surrounding Nick would intensify. Sharon's instincts would keep pushing her toward the truth, and her worry would become harder to dismiss. Something was wrong with Nick, and the longer he stayed missing or unreachable, the more terrifying the possibilities became. Sharon would begin to feel that sense of dread settling into her bones, the feeling that if she did not find him soon, she might be too late. At the same time, Matt Clark's shadow would loom larger than ever. Whatever he had planned for Nick was not over, and the danger would continue to escalate. The situation would become more unpredictable, more violent, and more desperate. Genoa City might not yet realize it, but one of its own was slipping dangerously close to total ruin. And just as all of that tension reached a breaking point, two familiar faces were set to return and shake things up in a major way. Malcolm Winters and Dr. Stephanie Simmons were preparing to resurface in Genoa City, and their arrival promised far more than a simple reunion. Their return was tied to a much larger story, one that had the potential to leave lasting consequences for multiple families. The biggest question surrounding their comeback would be impossible to ignore. Could Holden Novak actually be the long-lost son of Malcolm and Stephanie? The idea sounded shocking, but it was exactly the kind of buried truth that could explode through the city like a bomb. If Holden really was connected to them in that way, it would rewrite years of assumptions, relationships, and emotional history. It would also explain why their return was being framed as such a major turning point. This was not just about revisiting the past. This was about exposing a secret powerful enough to change the future. If that possibility proved true, the fallout would be enormous. Malcolm would be forced to face a part of his past he may never have expected to revisit. Stephanie's own history would come under a harsh new light, and Holden himself could find his entire identity turned upside down overnight. In a town like Genoa City, where bloodlines, family legacy, and buried secrets carry enormous weight, a revelation like that would affect far more than just the people directly involved. As all these storylines collided, one thing became painfully clear. Nobody in Genoa City was safe from what was coming. Lily's lies were unraveling. Victor's war with Cain was intensifying. Phyllis was becoming more dangerous by the day. Abby and Devon were facing heartbreaking fears about Dominic. Mariah and Tessa were standing on fragile emotional ground. Nick was spiraling into a nightmare that could destroy him. Sharon was growing more frightened. Sienna was becoming suspicious. Aden was drifting toward danger. And Malcolm and Stephanie's return promised to unlock a truth that could shake the city to its core. The next 2 weeks would not just bring drama. They would bring emotional wreckage, explosive confrontations, painful revelations, and consequences that would echo far beyond the moment they arrived. In Genoa City, every choice was about to matter. Every secret was becoming heavier, and every relationship was standing on the edge of collapse. And by the time the dust began to settle, nothing would feel the same again.